Hey, welcome to the Georgia HMIS HUD Data Standards training video. The main purpose of this video is going over the different changes that will be coming to the system on October 1st, 2019. So every so often, HUD releases what they call new data standards, and this is kind of the logic that drives a lot of HMIS. And so the different assessments that you're having to ask your clients, the different fields that you might see on a form, a lot of that's driven by HUD. So when there's new data standards come out, it does mean that there's some things in the system that will change. You can actually Google HUD data standards, and the first link will be the HUD exchange.info website. And if you click this link here, you'll actually have a couple documents that kind of go through all of the HUD logic of HMIS, but it will also cover the new things that I'm going to be covering today. And on this page, you have the HUD data dictionary, and you'll see that this is what's called the 2020 HUD data dictionary, but this is the one that is going to be relevant on October 1st, 2019. You can also always find previous documents, which for right now would be active because we haven't reached the October 1st date, so you can find these documents right here below. But you've got the HUD Data Dictionary, and it is a more technical document, but it is going to list in detail all of the different fields and assessments that are in HMIS. And so, for instance, if I go down here and click on Income and Sources, I'd be able to see all the different sources that you have to have listed in an HMIS. If I scroll down here, I can see what different funding sources are required to capture that income assessment. And then I can even see who this data needs to be collected for. So for income, for instance, we know head of households and adults. Those are the ones that have to have the income assessment. And even, well, when does that need to be collected? So we can see here, project start, if we're doing a during program or update enrollment assessment, annual assessment, project exit, and so forth. So it again has a lot of kind of technical things spelled out here of how HMIS works. It is a good document though to have as a reference. There's also though the HMIS Data Standards Manual, and I feel like especially for caseworkers, this one might be even a little bit more important. It is going to have all of the different fields listed out as well that are in HMIS. But for instance, let's click on Income and Sources in this document, and it's going to have a lot more verbiage here. This gives you a lot of context of actually, well, how should this question be asked to the client? How is this used? And some things like that. So I really recommend this document, especially for caseworkers, because there's just a lot of really good information in there. So let's go ahead and jump back into ClientTrack. And so I mentioned that there's some changes coming. Now, some of those are HUD specific changes that come a part of this new data standards that's coming out. I'm also going to cover a little bit later in the video just some few Ecovia changes. So when there are new data standards, sometimes Ecovia will take the opportunity to just make some improvements in the system that they can. And then also we just have some Georgia specific changes that as we were having to kind of look at all these different changes that are coming in the system, we said, hey, maybe there's some things we could kind of change to just improve the system for Georgia. And so I'll be going over all of those today in this video. So let's go ahead and jump into the HUD specific changes that are coming. The first thing I want to look at is the prior living situation question. This is found anytime you do an intake. So when you're in a workflow, this is going to come up. To save some time, I'm just going to go straight to the form because it is a form you should all be used to seeing. But here we are on our universal data assessment. And here we have the prior living situation question. So one, just a really slight change more visually than anything else, is there's now a category called other, and that's where you will find the client doesn't know, client refused, and data not collected. Before this was just kind of grouped in with the previous category. So just a slight change there. Another change is that for the emergency shelter answer here, we'll also find that now it contains for RY-funded host home shelters as well. So if a client is coming from that situation, this will also include that here under emergency shelter. We also, though, have host home non-crisis as an option. So if they are coming from this situation, then you want to make sure you are choosing this as it's appropriate. And then a couple of other new options that are new is the rental by client in a public housing unit and rental by client with HCV voucher, tenant, or project based. So for instance, if you're using paper intake forms, you would never want to just have the answer rental by client as an option. You want to make sure you have all of these different options listed out, because per HUD, this is kind of the level of detail they're wanting on these questions and answers. Speaking of paper intake forms, if you use the paper intake forms that Georgia provides, that we created, we will be updating those soon to make those available to you so that they match up with these new data standards and the questions and answers. There is one option that has actually gone away, you will no longer see, and that is interim housing. And that was found previously under homeless situations, so we can see it's not listed here anymore. But interim housing was a very specific prior living situation that honestly shouldn't have been used as much as it was from what we've seen in the system, so it was kind of used incorrectly, and it's probably one reason HUD is kind of removing that, is they found that it was just not being used correctly for the most part. So that will no longer be an option going forward. One thing I did want to bring up though about it is if you do want to go in and update any assessments that your agency has recorded with interim housing, you want to change that to a maybe more appropriate choice here. We did create a little report you can go run under, if you go to home and then under custom reports, client reports, you'll see interim housing assessments. Here you'll just want to blank out the max rows here and click view results. And what this would do was it would show you anytime your organization has recorded a client from coming from a interim housing prior living situation, and then you could go in and you could correct those or update those to a more appropriate choice. If you do need any help like that, with that, we have trained our COC admins, and they can assist you with that, so feel free to submit an issue ticket, and they can walk you through that. But those are the only changes for prior living situations, so just want to make sure you guys are kind of aware of what's going on there. In the same way, when you're going to exit a client, you're going to see those same changes reflected there. So under destination, we can see here the right funded host homes there, and then we also have host home here, as well as our other options that we've got here for public housing and HCV voucher. Next thing I want to talk about is barriers. So I'm going to just, again, for time's sake, just pull up the barrier screen here, but something you're all used to seeing when you do an intake. So we know that anytime you choose yes for a barrier being present, there's also the follow-up question condition is indefinite and substantially impairs ability to live independently. And this would be a required question then that it would make you answer. So what's coming with the change is that now for developmental disability as well as HIV/AIDS, it's not going to have that follow-up question. So if I go in and choose yes here, we can see it's not populating that second question. And that is by design. That is something that HUD has removed because they say for kind of the logic is that developmental disability and HIV/AIDS are normally always an indefinite barrier and is something that substantially impairs ability to live independently. So you won't have the follow-up questions here. Now the HUD logic of the way this interacts with disabling condition is kind of staying the same. So what I mean by that is that we know that if we had chosen disabling condition as no, but then we go in and choose yes for barrier, and choose that the condition is indefinite. This kind of creates data that is not aligned with each other, right? Because we're saying, well, there's this barrier that is indefinite and it's impairing my ability to live independently, but we've chosen no for disabling condition. So what would happen if we did this, and if actually I'll show you right here, if I try to click save, we're going to see there's an error here and it says, you've identified a special needs as indefinite. This conflicts with disabling status. And what you can do is if you just click save on this form again or save and close, it will go ahead and update the disabling condition to yes for you. So we can see that what it does is it makes the disabling condition question or answer align with whatever barriers are chosen. The same thing will happen with developmental disability and HIV/AIDS now if there's just a yes there. So if you're choosing yes on either of these, it will want to go ahead and update disabling condition to yes if it has not been already. So that actually covered all of the HUD specific changes that would apply to all projects. Next, I'm going to cover some project specific changes. For our RYE projects, that's our Runaway Homeless Youth Program, we have a couple new requirements there. The first one is anytime you're doing an enrollment, if it's a female and if it's a head of house, regardless of the age, pregnancy status will need to be captured, and that will come up automatically in your workflow on your health assessment. So we can see that listed here. Again, this will just be a required question regardless of the client's age, if they're female and if they're head of household. Second change for RYE is going to be on the RYE entry assessment. I'm going to just pull that up. Again, another thing you see automatically in the workflow. Under sexual orientation, you will now have an other option. And if you do choose other, then you will have a please describe, which is a text box where you can type that out there. Moving on. So for the HUD COC Youth Homeless Demonstration Program projects, that now requires sexual orientation question. So for instance, let's go ahead. I think I have, somebody enrolled in that, and I'm just going to pull up. Actually, it'll be that same assessment we just looked at, and we'll see that sexual orientation is required. And this was not required previously for this project type. Next, we have for our VA GPD, Grant Per Diem projects, a new requirement, and that is going to be for employment status. So for any of those projects, we're going to have this employment system assessment right here that will be required. Again, that's for any VA GPD projects. Next, for our PATH and SSVF projects, they are now going to require the DV assessment. So if let's pull up a PATH project here. So whether it's PATH or SSVF, you'll now see the domestic violence assessment coming within your workflow. There are some dependent questions on here. So for instance, we can see here if I choose yes, then there's going to be additional questions we have to answer. So again, as a reminder, if you're using paper intake forms, it needs to match this logic and make sure all of these questions are being captured. Another change for PATH specific is if we're choosing why someone could not be enrolled in PATH, there's a new option there. So I'm actually going to go into the workflow here so I can see this option here. So there's the question, client became enrolled in PATH. If I choose no here, the new option is unable to locate client. So that is a new option that you did not have before. Another big change that is coming and this will be for PATH, street outreach projects in general, or coordinated entry projects is that there's a new assessment called Living Situation, which looks like this right here. And this will be a new assessment that you see instead of contacts. So previously those projects would have recorded contacts, or at least Path and Street Outreach would have recorded contacts. Now they're going to record that as living situation under a living situation assessment. Now, because this is quite a change for those project types, I'm actually doing a separate video that's really going to get into details on this new assessment, but I'm not going to cover it here just for everybody's time's sake. But if you are a Path project, a Street Outreach project, or coordinated entry project, or you key into coordinated entry system, you will want to watch the additional video that we'll be releasing soon as well alongside this one, which will really detail this new assessment. But what I did want to cover is how this change could affect other projects as well. And that is because the way contacts worked, every time you would record one of those, it would record as a service. And we can actually see here, this was a contact service that was recorded. So for instance, when your Street Outreach projects were interacting with clients, every time they interacted with them, they would record a contact. And it was nice for everybody because you could go in and, like, if you're working on a client and you're trying to see if they're still active, if anyone's still working with them, you could go under their services and you'd be able to quickly see the last contacts that they got from a Street Outreach project. Well, now with this change, that will no longer be recording a service, so you would not see any more contact services populate here for clients. But to kind of help everybody work together closer, we have added living situation history now as an option for everyone, so you will be able to see that history regardless what kind of project your organization provides. You'll still be able to see living situation history, because we know that can still be relevant information for you to just know on the clients that you're working for. And that actually concludes all of the HUD specific changes. So next we're going to get into the changes that Ecovia is making. So you might have already noticed in this training video, but here on the dashboard under clients enrollments, they now have categorized or have them grouped by project type. So we can see here this client is in 2 different homelessness prevention projects, and then we can see these other categories of project types here. And so this is just kind of gives you a better visual idea of the different project types that your client is actively enrolled in. And same way if they have been exited, we have all our active enrollments here, and then we have our exits down here, and those will be grouped as well. And these are collapsible. So for instance, if I just wanted to look at things that projects where the client's been exited from, I can do that. You know, if I wanted to collapse my homeless prevention projects, I could do that, or any of these categories. And so those are all just kind of click and collapse or expand. So that's one change there that Ecovia's made. Also, we've got a new column here called active case members. Now, before we had just case members, which lists how many members were enrolled into the project. Active case members takes into account if maybe one of those clients has been exited, but one is still enrolled. So this is a good example here. So in this case here, in this emergency shelter enrollment, there are 2 case members. There were 2 people that were enrolled into this, so 2 family members. But one of those has been exited now. In this case, it's the client I've got pulled up because we can see there's a project exit date. So now there's actually only 1 active case member. So this just gives you a good visual on if maybe someone's still enrolled in the project. This could also be a really good reminder that maybe if you've gone and exited somebody, but you didn't go exit the family members, and really they all needed to be exited together, you would have a reminder here to show, oh, you know, we had 2 case members, there's still 1 active, I should go in and exit the other family member. A few other changes are if you click the action button on an enrollment. So one, there's some new icons here, so things might look a little, well, they will look a little different than you're used to. So if you're clicking in here and you're like, I don't see an option that I know used to be here, it's probably here, but just might look a little different. So be sure to just spend a little time reading the labels here, making sure you kind of see what's available. And there is a new option here called Edit Enrollment. So if I click Edit Enrollment, it's going to bring up the enrollment information of this enrollment in a little different way than we've seen before. So this is kind of a new form here, but this allows us to go in and we can update the project start date, for instance. If this was a housing project, this is how we would go in and add move-in date. If this client had been exited, we'd have the exit date here. We could go in and change any of the information that's on this screen. And so it's just an easy way to quickly get to enrollment information. Before, what we would advise people is they'd have to start a edit enrollment workflow, go make the change there after skipping a couple of forms, and then exit the workflow. And this just takes you directly to it, to that information, allowing you to easily go in and edit that. We still do have the edit project entry workflow right here, where if you do need to make changes throughout the workflow, you can do that as such. Also, if someone's been exited already, instead of having the exit the enrollment option, now you have the edit exit workflow. So if you've already exited someone, but you need to go in and edit some of the assessments that were done, you can go here, and this will allow you to go in and edit that information. So those are the Ecovia specific changes that are coming. And now, last but not least, are just some changes that we've implemented in Georgia to hopefully make it a little easier on everybody. So one, you might have noticed now there's just a project intake button up here. There used to also be a RIE project intake button here. We've now gotten rid of that because you can actually, regardless of your project type, if you are a funded agency, you can click on project intake and it's going to ask all the needed assessment questions in it. It's got that logic built in where you're not having to go choose a different button to start that intake. So this was kind of along the same lines of, we used to have a street outreach work group which had its own kind of workflow. A while back we combined those, and so this is just kind of part of that same idea of kind of consolidating, making things easier on everybody where everyone can just kind of use the same project intake button. So again, if you are a funded agency, you have funded projects, this will be the button that you use. Now for anyone that has a project set up in the system as a non-funded project, we still do have the non-funded work group for you to have access to. Next, you will see a couple of extra what are called workspaces that you did not have access to before. So I'm going to go over those, and this is for anyone that is in the Georgia HMIS programs work group, which is the kind of standard work group for the most part that everybody stays in. But here we have an issues workspace now, and what this is going to allow you to do is it's going to have all of your submitted issues. So we can see here's all of our submitted issues. Now this is a form you're probably already used to going to and you could get to from the home workspace by clicking on my submitted issues. Here though, we did add a couple extra columns that hopefully will be helpful. These last two columns here, last note date and last note by, list the last time a note was left on this comment or this issue ticket, and also who that was by. So maybe you have several issue tickets that are still open, you've submitted, and we've gone and replied to them. Well, if you pull this up, you'd be able to quickly see, oh, John McGee's replied to this ticket, I should probably go in and reply back to it. So this just kind of gives you a bird's eye view at all your issue tickets and the current status of them. By default, it does not have closed issue tickets listed here, those are issue tickets that you've gone in and marked verified. So when we mark it issue ticket fixed, it will still show up on this list by default. But then when you go in and mark it verified, that's when it goes officially closed. And so by default, it won't show here. But if you did want to see those as well, you can do that by clicking on that. Also, we have the issue ticket number search box here. So if there's a specific issue ticket you want to find, you can type that in here and then quickly get to that ticket. Also, we added the My Organizations Submitted issues, and what this does is this is going to, in the same way, list all of the issue tickets that are either open, new, marked as fixed, anything that's not marked as closed, but it's going to be for your organization. So maybe someone from your organization has already submitted an issue ticket on something you're experiencing. You can quickly go here, and also it will list the username here, and you'll be able to see any issue tickets your organization has submitted. And you'll also find the same additional columns here added and the issue ticket search. We also have this button here, View Edit Selected Issue. What this does is it's going to pull up the last issue ticket you had pulled up and were looking at. So if I click here, it's going to take me straight to the last ticket that I had pulled up. So again, hopefully these will be some things that just kind of help you navigate the issue ticket management system a little better and have you a little bit more access there. And also everyone will have a provider's workspace now. This is mostly relevant for any agencies that are set up as being a provider to receive referrals. But what you can do here is if you click Find Provider and click Search, it's going to pull up any providers that have been set up, which would be something that's set up by your COC admins. So this should just list your organization name listed here. But you'd be able to click on that and then go to the provider dashboard, and here you would be able to see incoming referrals that have been made to your agency. And again, these are all just some things that for Georgia we have gone in and added as we felt they would be of use. So those are all the changes. Again, these are all coming October 1st, 2019. So we want to go ahead and get this video to you so you can kind of be aware of those. As always, if you have any issues or questions about this, whether it's before October 1st or after October 1st, you have any problems with these new changes, you can always go in and click Help and report an issue and let us know what's going on, and we will help you the best we can. Thanks and have a great day.